Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC Paris, Ciryl Gane versus Tai Tuivasa just ended, and this is going to be my UFC Paris post-fight. I'm mainly going to discuss the main event, Ciryl Gane versus Tai Tuivasa, but I'm also going to discuss some of the other notable fights on the main card of UFC Paris, and the main event was absolutely incredible to watch. Ciryl Gane gets a third round TKO over Tai Tuivasa. And this was a fight that going into it, I truly thought was a mismatch. And I truly thought that Ciryl Gane would be very dominant in this fight. And I still feel like, that's kind of true. But there was one massive surprise in the second round. And even you look back at my prediction video, I actually predicted Ciryl Gane by third round TKO. And the fight pretty much played out exactly how I expected and exactly how I laid out outside of what happened in the second round, which we'll talk about in a second. So the first round was a typical Ciryl Gane performance. He was just picking Tai Tuivasa apart, teeping to the body, pumping the jab, circling away from him. And I feel like Tai Tuivasa in this first round, you could tell he was very conscious that this was a 5-round fight, because he knew he couldn't just explode constantly in the first round, looking to take Ciryl Gane's head off and then be left without cardio in that third, fourth, and fifth round. And going into this fight, I was highly questionable of Tai Tuivasa's cardio. And it seemed like he was setting that pace early where he's like, okay, I got to be able to last 4 or 5 rounds, because who knows if I'm able to get this knockout, because Ciryl Gane is the biggest step up in competition that Tai Tuivasa has ever faced. And in that first round, he wasn't super aggressive, and Ciryl Gane is never really super aggressive. He kind of picks you apart and then finds openings, and then he finally takes advantages of them. But in this first round, it wasn't super eventful. It was Ciryl Gane teeping to the body kicks, pumping the jab, using his footwork, circling out. Tai Tuivasa had, some moments where he threw combinations and kind of pressed forward, but for the majority of the fight and the majority of the first round, it was just Tai Tuivasa kind of following him. Ciryl Gane was chopping the legs of Tai early. And Tai Tuivasa has some great leg kicks as well. But Ciryl Gane was really checking most of them and avoiding a lot of them as well with his footwork and in and out movement. I mean, the distance management from Ciryl Gane throughout his UFC career and in this Tai Tuivasa fight was very, very good. So then you go into the second round, and it looks like it's going to be pretty much the same as the first round. Ciryl Gane's picking him apart with the jab. He's teeping to the body. He's landing body kicks as well. Then all of a sudden, the whole entire fight changes. Tai Tuivasa lands a nasty right hand as Ciryl Gane's kind of backed up against the fence. He doesn't have a lot of space to move backwards. Tai Tuivasa drops him with the right hand. And to be honest, when I first saw this, I really thought that Ciryl Gane may be flash KO'd here. I thought he might be over. He kind of fell down to a knee up against the fence. He starts to get up, and Tai Tuivasa starts ripping off another right hand. It partially lands, and Ciryl Gane scrambles back to his feet, and somehow he survives. He didn't even look that bad or wobbly when he got up. He was clearly still hurt. He wasn't moving as well, but it didn't look like, oh my God, okay, Tai Tuivasa's on the verge of finishing him, and he was going after him. And guess what happens? Gane hurts him to the body, starts spamming the teep kicks nonstop, spamming the jump-in knees to the body, and then he's kind of tracking Tai Tuivasa down. It looks like, okay, Tai Tuivasa's like hunched over holding his stomach, and it looks like Ciryl Gane's going to finish him. And credit to Ciryl Gane. He showed a killer instinct in that second round, but guess what happened? Tai Tuivasa throws a massive hook. I think it was a left hook. Lands a left hook and kind of wobbles Ciryl Gane. Ciryl Gane all of a sudden goes back to the game plan. He backs up and he's like, I can't get careless like that looking for a finish, because if I do, Tai Tuivasa is going to put me to sleep. And so then it goes back, and then it's kind of the same thing as we've seen for the rest of the fight. It's just Ciryl Gane kind of beating him up, teeping him to the body, pumping the jab, landing some left hand, switching stances a little bit here and there. And this was a round that a lot of people gave to Tai Tuivasa. A lot of people had it 1-1 going into the third round. I leaned Tai just because he dropped him, but at the same time, Ciryl almost finished him as well. And then the vast majority of the round, outside of those 2 huge punches from Tai Tuivasa, Ciryl Gane was winning. So I almost can give it back to Ciryl Gane, really thinking about it. But it's hard to forget him dropping Ciryl Gane. And that's like the moment where, depending on how you score the round, you could say, well, he dropped him. He definitely wins it. But Ciryl Gane got very close to finishing him as well. So that's a 50-50 round. Flip a coin. I don't care who you give it to. But after that second round, I really thought, okay, it's over for Tai. He was bleeding badly. Towards the end of the second round, he was getting jabbed up pretty badly. He had his explosion where he was really looking for the finish. He didn't find it. He was breathing heavy. He was starting to look tired. And in that third round, I don't know what Tai Tuivasa is made out of, but there was multiple points where I thought he would get finished. He was eating teep kicks like crazy. It was hurting him to the body. And then Ciryl Gane goes upstairs with a head kick and lands a nasty head kick right on Tai Tuivasa. And for a second, I thought we were going to get a Edson Barboza, Shane Burgos-esque KO. And I don't know if Tai Tuivasa was playing possum or he was just hurt so badly and then decided to swing like crazy. But it looked like he was starting to turn away, and it looked like his brain was going to shut off and he was just going to melt to the floor. But then all of a sudden, as Ciryl Gane starts to move in, Tai starts swinging haymakers, looking to put Ciryl Gane out, but Ciryl Gane dodges all of them. Then Ciryl Gane lands a front kick to the face, and Tai Tuivasa just eats it. But he's beaten up badly. He's bloody. And then it kind of goes back to like a reset a little bit, where Tai kind of recovers. And then it's just Ciryl Gane sticking to the game plan, pumping the jab, teep into the body. And eventually, as the round goes on, it's just like Tai Tuivasa just eating so much damage, eating so many teep kicks, eating so many knees to the body. Ciryl Gane landed the step-in knee to the body multiple times. In that second round, I forgot to mention, when Tai had hurt him and then was trying to swarm him and then Tai got hurt to the body, the UFC showed a replay of a heavy body kick that they thought hurt Tai Tuivasa, which it did, don't get me wrong. But what hurt Tai to the body before that, but from the camera angle, it was hard to see, Ciryl Gane landed a step-in knee, and that's what initiated the almost finishing sequence in the second round for Ciryl Gane. It wasn't that heavy body kick. Obviously, that attributed to it, but a lot of people missed that. But in the third round, it's just Tai was just getting badly beaten, getting teeped to death, getting jabbed to death, and this is exactly kind of what I thought would happen in this fight. Tai Tuivasa realized, okay, it's getting late in the fight. I'm getting beat up. I'm getting hurt a lot. I mean, because Gane was just spamming the teep to the body. And he decides he's going to press forward. He's going to blitz forward. He's going to throw a couple heavy haymakers. And guess what? Ciryl Gane ducks him. Tai Tuivasa's hands are down. And Ciryl Gane throws. It's almost a right hand, but it's an uppercut as well. It came from a weird angle. Throws a right uppercut and just hurts Tai Tuivasa badly. And you could just tell at that point he's kind of out on his feet. Ciryl Gane swarms him with some heavy hooks, lands pretty much everything he throws. Tai Tuivasa melts to the ground. At that point, it's over. The referee, Mark Goddard, starting to step in, but he throws a couple hammer fists, puts Tai Tuivasa out. And I thought it was a KO. I think they called it a TKO. But Tai Tuivasa was out cold, I'm pretty sure. And Ciryl Gane wins the fight. And outside of that one moment in the second round where Tai Tuivasa rocked him, this was a Ciryl Gane great performance. I mean, and he showed that he's evolved a little bit. I think a lot of people are going to look at Ciryl Gane and say, okay, we see that he's got a little bit more of a killer instinct, because if that's one critique of Ciryl Gane, it's been, well, he never really goes for the finish. Well, in this fight, he put himself in some risky positions and looking for a finish. And a lot of people always said, oh, he just kind of waits on the outside and picks you apart. He's scared of engaging. Some people say that. But in this fight, he showed that he's looking for finishes. And he almost got finished himself doing that, which is absolutely insane to me. And what a performance by Ciryl Gane. And to see him, another thing that we've very rarely seen from Ciryl Gane is for him to face adversity. I know he lost the Francis Ngannou fight back at UFC 270 in January this year. But outside of just being taken down and beat up a little bit on the ground, he didn't face any real severe adversity. And in this fight, he got dropped badly, and he showed a good ability to recover, and he also showed a good chin, because that right hand that Tai Tuivasa dropped him with would have put a lot of guys out, and he's just so technical. I mean, there's so much to look at this fight. I'm not super high on Tai Tuivasa. I know people hate to hear that. He almost got finished by Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy got overconfident, got clipped himself. But I'm not super high on Tai, but just the fact that Gane just put on a masterclass performance outside of getting dropped. Tai Tuivasa, what's his other strength? He has great leg kicks. Very rarely landed any of those. And Ciryl Gane was beating up the legs of Tai Tuivasa throughout this fight as well. Ciryl Gane, great performance, faces adversity. He says he wants another shot at the belt. I'll tell you what I want to happen in the heavyweight division. I believe that Ciryl Gane should fight Curtis Blaydes for the #1 contender. I believe that Francis Ngannou should fight Jon Jones, defending his heavyweight belt. And then the winners of those two fights can fight each other. And if, depending on how this all goes down, if Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou doesn't happen till February or March, maybe we can get Curtis Blaydes versus Ciryl Gane before the end of the year, and then the winner of that fight could fight Stipe Miocic. But Stipe hasn't fought since, I think it was UFC 260, where he got flatlined by Francis Ngannou, and it just seems like he's retired at this point, so I'm just ignoring Stipe Miocic at this point. So do Ciryl Gane versus Curtis Blaydes. Let's test Ciryl Gane's wrestling ability. It showed holes in the Francis Ngannou fight. If he's able to defeat Curtis Blaydes, and that's a very compelling heavyweight fight, have him fight the winner of Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones, who will be the heavyweight champ. But Ciryl Gane said, I'll fight Jon Jones, in December if nobody else will. He said he's happy to see Jon Jones in the heavyweight division. So shout out to Ciryl Gane. He looks like a new breed of heavyweight. I've been saying this for quite a while, and he just looks so good. And I think he could really still become champion one day. I know a lot of people are going to look at this fight and say, if you're getting clipped by Tai Tuivasa, you're going to get clipped by Francis Ngannou. I understand that, but at the same time, he didn't get put out. I'm more interested in what is Ciryl Gane's wrestling ability like now, and how would it look against a great wrestler like Curtis Blaydes. As far as Tai Tuivasa in this fight, I have to respect him. I mean, we already knew he was made of granite. We already knew that, he had unbelievable power and explosiveness. And in this fight, I counted him out completely, and he was very close to getting the job done. He almost put Ciryl Gane's lights out. So you have to respect that, even though I'm not particularly high on him. And I hope, he takes some good time off, because he did take a lot of damage in this fight to the face and to the body. And, I just want him to take some time off, and then he can come back next year. And, there's plenty of guys in the heavyweight division he can fight, and there'll probably be some fights that play out. For all we know, they could do Curtis Blaydes versus Ciryl Gane. They could do Stipe Miocic versus Tai Tuivasa, and Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones. And, however those fights play out, then we can kind of, figure out the division after that. So there's a lot of fun matchups in the heavyweight division, especially with hopefully Jon Jones making his heavyweight debut in the next 6 months. If not, my head's going to explode. But I'm going to move on to the co-main event, Robert Whittaker versus Marvin Vettori. And this was just a masterclass performance by Robert Whittaker. In my opinion, he won all 3 rounds. He should have been a 30-27. And in my opinion, this first round was not even close. Some people were saying it went to Vettori. Some people were saying it was a close round. There is a big difference between close and competitive. And I don't believe the first round was close. It was competitive. It was not close. And this fight actually played out exactly how I thought as well. You can check out my prediction video for this fight as well. Robert Whittaker, he's just the more skilled fighter. He's better everywhere than Marvin Vettori. And, the first round was a little bit slow. It wasn't super active, but Whittaker just pumping the jab out there, landing the right hand, chopping the legs. And Marvin Vettori just kind of plots forward with his pressure, and he just has a hard time finding any shots on Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker has great distance management. He has a great variety of attacks. He has good head movement. He has good wrestling. He's not worried about the takedown from Marvin Vettori. And it was hard for Vettori to find Whittaker in any capacity. The first round went to Robert Whittaker. He landed the better shots. It wasn't a dominant round, but I did not think it was close. I mean, Vettori was swinging and hitting air quite a bit in this first round. The second round, though, Robert Whittaker just started to take over. He was landing nasty right hands. He was landing head kicks. He was landing perfectly timed oblique kicks. I think in the second round, Vettori looked for a takedown, but it didn't even come close. They ended up clinching up against the cage. Then they ended up, disengaging. And this second round, I mean, there was a couple times Vettori was kind of stung a little bit. I don't want to say, he was almost finished or anything like that, but he was rocked. And Vettori just plots forward, and Whittaker just picks him apart with his arsenal of attacks. Third round, almost exactly to the second round. picking Vettori apart, landing good right hands, landing good head kicks, chopping the legs, good footwork. Marvin Vettori just swinging and hitting air. Wasn't landing a lot of shots at all. I mean, Vettori landed a couple leg kicks. I think he landed one body kick throughout the fight. But this was a fight where Robert Whittaker just showed that outside of Israel Adesanya, the champion of the middleweight division, Robert Whittaker is just levels above everyone else. Because Marvin Vettori is a very good fighter. And Robert Whittaker went out there and made him look like he didn't even belong in there with him. If Israel Adesanya doesn't exist, Robert Whittaker is still the long reigning middleweight champion. Because, he's just so good and so technical. And he goes out there and he makes adjustments mid-fight. And, to go out there against a guy like Vettori, who's, a top 5 guy, he's a legit top 5 middleweight, and pick him apart and outclass him in the capacity he did. Spectacular performance by Robert Whittaker. And there was a couple moments where he had Vettori in trouble, had him a little bit rocked, and that doesn't happen very often to Marvin Vettori. It just doesn't. Marvin Vettori is made of granite as well, and that's exactly why I thought this fight would go to decision. And Robert Whittaker, I don't know where he goes from here. Maybe he fights Paulo Costa for a number 1 contender fight. If Alex Pereira is able to dethrone Adesanya, I mean, he could be next in line, but Adesanya will probably at least get an immediate rematch. So it's kind of a weird position. This was a fight between Whittaker and Vettori of 2 guys who've already lost to the champion twice. And, it's like 2 guys that you don't want killing off contenders. So the best Whittaker can pray for is that Adesanya loses the belt and then loses the immediate rematch. And I know people are going to say, well, the second fight was very close against Adesanya. We need to see a third fight, this and that. I don't really think so. I kind of want to see it. And if he wins another fight against another top-ranked guy, how can you deny it? But, having a trilogy when one guy won both of the first 2 fights, one of them by dominant stoppage, I get the division is lackluster, but you have guys like the guy I'm going to talk about in a minute, Nassourdine Imavov, coming up the ranks. You have Andre Muniz. You have Alex Pereira kind of making his way there right now. He's going to get the title shot at UFC 281. I'm hoping that some of these guys can make their way to the top of the division. And Whittaker, I think, has to win at least 3 fights before getting another shot against Adesanya if he's still the champion. And I know that sounds crazy, but at the same time, if he loses the belt, I'm okay with Whittaker getting a title shot tomorrow. If Alex Pereira goes out there, outclasses Adesanya and beats him up and takes the title and nobody wants to see a rematch, I'm okay with Whittaker getting a rematch because Whittaker just looks so fluid in there. He looks like, he's so much better every single time he comes out. He's still evolving. He has great grappling, great defensive wrestling, great striking. He's very fast. He has good power. He has great stamina. He's very durable himself. There's nothing not to like about Robert Whittaker's skill set. As far as Marvin Vettori, he swung and hit a lot of air. He's very durable, but he's just not particularly skilled. He's very well-rounded, but he's just not very skilled, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I don't know where Vettori goes from here. I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch with Paulo Costa, but at the same time, I wouldn't mind seeing Whittaker versus Costa. That's a fight that was supposed to happen in April of 2021 that never happened, and Costa pulled out and Kelvin stepped in. So that's a fight that I would like to see. Paulo Costa coming off a win, Whittaker coming off a win now. Match those 2 up. But I don't know where Vettori goes. Maybe Vettori could fight Jared Cannonier after Sean Strickland pulled out. That's another option. Jared Cannonier coming off a loss to Israel Adesanya. That's a matchup I'd like to see. But Marvin Vettori, he said, he hopes Adesanya loses to Alex P. I don't think Vettori ever gets the belt. He's a good fighter, but he's just not a great fighter. And also, at least he acknowledged the loss in this fight. I don't think he thought he won this fight. He apologized afterwards, which he didn't need to do, obviously. But, I don't know where Vettori goes because he's going to be one of those guys that's always just, I don't want to call him a gatekeeper, but he's more of like a championship keeper. Like you beat Marvin Vettori in your championship caliber. He's lost to Whittaker now. He has 2 losses to Adesanya. I just don't see him making his way to the belt at all. Moving down the card, the last fight I'm going to talk about, and a fight that I was really looking forward to on the card, Nassourdine Imavov versus Joaquin Buckley. And this was a very fun fight. And I actually scored this fight 30-27 for Nassourdine Imavov. I know a lot of people are going to call me crazy. I'll explain it in a second. But Nassourdine looked incredible in the first round. He was picking Joaquin Buckley apart. At the end of the first round, Joaquin Buckley shot in on a takedown, reversed. Nassourdine Imavov gets into the full mount, and it's like 10 or 15 seconds left. And a lot of people would have just said, you know what, I'm going to, cement this position. I'm going to make sure I get this round, and I'll go on to the second round, and I ended in a dominant position. No, not Nassourdine Imavov. Starts throwing brutal ground and pound elbows, and had he had 30 seconds or a minute, I think he might have finished Joaquin Buckley in the first round. I really do believe that. He was throwing brutal ground and pound shots, and Joaquin Buckley had no answers for it. The second round, more of the same. Nassourdine Imavov just picking him apart with the straight right, landing good shots on the feet, had good clinch exchanges as well. Eventually takes Joaquin Buckley down with a double leg takedown. Eventually, as Buckley's trying to get up, he gets Buckley's back. He starts looking for a rear naked choke. Couple times where it gets close and he's kind of wrenching, but it's really not under the chin. Joaquin Buckley survives. You get to the third round. Clear 10-9 rounds, 1 and 2 for Nassourdine Imavov. The third round is what most people score for Joaquin Buckley. And I believe that Nassourdine Imavov won this round. I don't think it's crazy to score it for Buckley, but I think Imavov won this round because Buckley came out with a sense of urgency, and Nassourdine Imavov was clearly getting tired, and Buckley was clearly the fresher fighter in the third round. But what happened in this round was Buckley spamming punches, and most of them were hitting air. He landed a good uppercut in the third round, but not a lot of the shots that Buckley was throwing were landing in the third round. I thought Nassourdine landed the better shots. There were some clinch exchanges where he landed a nasty standing elbow on Joaquin Buckley. And, I get it. You can give it to Buckley in the third round, but I personally just thought that Nassourdine Imavov landed the better shots in the third round. I don't know how many times we have to discuss this. We talked about it in the Josh Emmett versus Calvin Kattar fight. Moving forward and throwing big power punches that don't land or just brush off the forearms of their opponents don't win them rounds. And maybe, if I go back and watch it, maybe more landed than I gave credit for. But I thought Nassourdine took the third round as well. It was a little bit closer. But either way, whether it's 29-28 for Nassourdine or 30-27 for Nassourdine, the right guy got the decision. And Nassourdine Imavov looks so much bigger than Buckley in this fight. I don't know where Buckley goes from here. Maybe he goes down to 170 pounds. I don't know. Nassourdine Imavov, I've been talking about him for a while. I think he's a future contender in the 185-pound division. And he just looks so good and so well-rounded. The only real critique you can give of him is he clearly can't go 5 rounds. The third round, he was very, very tired. So he needs to work on his cardio, make sure he can have 5-round cardio. But outside of that, he's a hard matchup. He's a very good striker. He has good power. He has good jiu-jitsu. He has good wrestling. He has good wrestling defense because Buckley shot in on a couple takedowns. And how crazy is that? Buckley's looking for the grappling. That's how good of a striker that Nassourdine Imavov is. So Nassoudine's probably going to creep into that top 10. I don't even think Buckley is ranked. Maybe he is. I don't think he is. But, it's not a massive win over like a top 10 ranked guy. But Nassourdine, I believe, made it look relatively easy, especially in those first 2 rounds. So I think give him a top 10 opponent, maybe even a top 5 opponent. The division's kind of stale. We need fresh contenders in the middleweight division. And Nassourdine Imavov looks like he's well on his way to becoming a world-class middleweight fighter. I mean, the skill set looks so good. He's accurate on the feet. He has a good variety of attack. He has good defensive wrestling, good offensive wrestling, good jiu-jitsu. I mean, the skills are there. Now, he's got to work on the stamina. He's pretty good defensively as well. He hasn't shown a lot of jiu-jitsu or a lot of wrestling. But Nassourdine Imavov, I believe, 1 or 2 more wins, depending on how the middleweight division plays out with Adesanya and Alex Pereira, he's right up there in title contention. I mean, Alex Pereira fought one ranked guy, and he's fighting for a title. I know that's because of the backstory between Adesanya and Pereira. But Nassourdine Imavov's still a young guy. I believe he could be the future of the middleweight division. I'm not saying he's going to be champion, but I'm saying I think he'll definitely be in some number 1 contender fights, if not a title fight in the next year or so. So let me know what you guys think about all these fights down in the comments. I appreciate you guys watching my UFC Paris post-fight. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.